It hurts. I can't close my leg, the giant virgin mail order bride said. The rancher reached down and found something unbelievable. It hurts. I can't close my leg. The words trembled from Magnolia's lips as she sank into the hay, her white dress pooling around her giant frame, tears streaming down her beautiful face. Coltrane Bridger, the lonely rancher who'd sent for a mail-order bride to fill the emptiness in his heart, felt his chest tighten as he knelt beside the towering woman who was supposed to become his wife. "Easy now, easy," he whispered, his rough hands gentle as they steadied her trembling shoulders. But when she gasped, "Please, something's wrong. I can't close my leg," his concern deepened into something more. The giant virgin bride looked up at him with such raw vulnerability in her eyes, this woman who stood taller than any man in Wyoming territory, and whispered through her pain, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The rancher reached down tenderly, his calloused fingers trembling, and what he discovered made his heart break and his protective instincts roar to life. This wasn't the wedding day either of them had imagined. But what had this gentle giant been hiding beneath her brave facade? What unbelievable truth would the rancher discover that would transform their arranged marriage from a business transaction into the most profound love story the Old West had ever known? And why did her whispered apology sound less like shame and more like a desperate plea for the one thing she'd never been given? Tenderness. Cole's fingers touched something warm and wet beneath the fabric of her dress, and when he pulled his hand back, his palm was stained red. Blood. Fresh blood. His eyes snapped to hers, and in that moment, he saw everything she'd been trying to hide. The way she'd flinched when he'd helped her down from the wagon that morning. The way she'd gripped the pew during their wedding ceremony like she might collapse. The way she'd asked him 3 times if they could delay the wedding night, her voice small and desperate. "Nola," he said, using the name she'd told him she preferred, his voice dropping to something soft and urgent. "What happened to you? Who did this?" She turned her face away, fresh tears cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks, and Cole felt something inside him crack wide open. This woman, this magnificent, towering woman who should have been strong enough to face down the world, was broken in ways he couldn't see yet. And somebody had done it to her. Somebody had hurt her so badly she could barely walk, let alone stand. "I need to see," he said gently, his hands moving to the hem of her dress. "I need to see how bad it is, Nola. Please let me help you." Her hand shot out and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength, her green eyes wide with terror. "No! You'll send me back! You'll say I'm damaged goods! You'll say I lied to you!" Her voice broke on the last word, and Cole felt his heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. What kind of monsters had this woman known that she thought he'd abandon her like this? What kind of men had she encountered that made her believe she deserved to suffer in silence? He covered her hand with his calloused palm rough against her soft skin. "I'm not sending you anywhere," he said, and there was steel in his voice now, the kind of iron determination that had kept him alive through 3 Wyoming winters and a war that tried to kill him. "You're my wife now, Nola. That means something to me. That means I protect you, I care for you, and I sure as hell don't abandon you when you're hurting." She searched his face, looking for the lie, looking for the trap. But Cole had never been good at deception. What she saw in his blue eyes was the truth, raw, honest, and fierce. "It was the wagon master," she whispered, the words barely audible over the sound of the wind rattling the barn walls. "Gideon Moss. 5 days ago. He came to my tent after everyone else was asleep, and he said I owed him. Said a woman my size was made for men like him. I tried to fight him, Cole. I swear I tried, but he was so strong, and when I screamed, he put his hand over my mouth and said if I told anyone, he'd make sure I never made it to Wyoming. He'd leave me in the middle of nowhere to die." Cole's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. His free hand curled into a fist, knuckles white, and for a moment Nola saw something dangerous flash across his face, something that reminded her he wasn't just a rancher, but a man who'd survived a war. Did he? Cole's voice came out rough, barely controlled. Did he force himself on you? Nola nodded, her whole body shaking now, and Cole closed his eyes against the wave of fury that threatened to consume him. When he opened them again, his gaze was gentle, but there was murder in his heart. "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the rage burning in his chest. "All right, Nola. First thing we're going to do is get you up to the house where it's warm. Then I'm going to tend to your injuries as best I can. And then—" His eyes went cold as a January morning. "Then I'm going to find Gideon Moss, and I'm going to make him wish he'd never been born." But Nola shook her head frantically, her fingers digging into his arm. "No, you can't. He's friends with the sheriff. He told me that. He said even if I told, nobody would believe me because I'm just a mail-order bride, and he's made this trip a dozen times. He said I'd be the one arrested for making false accusations." Cole's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away her tears with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "I don't care if he's friends with the president himself," Cole said softly. "Nobody hurts my wife and walks away. Nobody. But right now, you're what matters. Getting you safe, getting you healed, that's all I care about." He slipped one arm under her knees and the other behind her back, and despite her height, despite her size, he lifted her like she weighed nothing at all. Nola gasped, her arms instinctively wrapping around his neck, and for the first time in 5 days, she felt something other than pain and terror. She felt protected. She felt safe. And as Cole carried her out of the barn toward the ranch house, the late afternoon sun painting the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and crimson, Magnolia Ashworth realized that maybe, just maybe, she'd found the one man in the world who would see her not as too much or too tall or too broken, but as exactly enough. The ranch house was small but solid, built from timber that had weathered 100 Wyoming storms. Cole kicked the door open with his boot and carried Nola straight through the narrow hallway to the bedroom at the back. The room smelled of pine and leather and something faintly sweet. Lavender, maybe, from sachets tucked into the dresser drawers. He laid her gently on the bed, and Nola's eyes widened as she took in the space. This was a woman's room. The quilt was hand-stitched in a pattern of interlocking rings. Lace curtains hung at the windows. A silver hairbrush sat on the vanity, next to a small music box shaped like a bird. "This was Clara's room," Cole said quietly, following her gaze. "My first wife. She died 3 years back, her and our baby both. Couldn't bring myself to change anything." He moved to the dresser and pulled out clean linens, his movements efficient despite the tension in his shoulders. "I've been sleeping in the smaller room down the hall since then. Couldn't stand being in here without her." Nola's throat tightened. "I can't take her room. It's not right." But Cole was already lighting the oil lamp on the bedside table, his face half in shadow. "Clara would want it used. She'd want someone to love this room again. And besides—" He turned to face her, and there was something achingly honest in his expression. "You need space. You need privacy. You need a place that's yours, where you feel safe. This is that place now." He disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a basin of water, clean cloths, and a bottle of something that smelled sharp and medicinal. His hands were steady as he set everything on the nightstand, but Nola could see the muscle jumping in his jaw, could see the way his breath came just a little too fast. He was trying to stay calm for her, but underneath, he was furious. "I need to examine you properly," Cole said, his eyes meeting hers. "I need to see how bad the damage is, and I need to clean the wounds before infection sets in. I've done field medicine before, during the war, and here on the ranch when the hands get injured. I know what I'm doing. But Nola, he knelt beside the bed, bringing himself to her eye level. I won't do anything without your permission. If you want me to ride into town and fetch the doctor, I will. If you want me to bring Constance Turnbull from the neighboring ranch to help instead, I'll do that too. You're in control here. You get to decide. Nola looked at this man she'd married just hours ago, this stranger who was offering her something no one ever had, choice. The trembling in her hands began to still. The doctor will ask questions, she said slowly, and Mrs. Turnbull will gossip. The whole town will know by morning. Cole nodded. That's true, but I don't give a damn what this town thinks. I care what you need. She took a shaky breath. Then I want you to do it. I trust you, Cole. I don't know why, but I do. The words hung in the air between them, fragile and precious as spun glass. Cole's eyes softened, and he reached out to squeeze her hand once before standing. All right, I'm going to be as gentle as I can, but it's still going to hurt. If you need me to stop, you say so. If you need to cry, or yell, or hit something, that's fine too. Whatever you need to get through this. He helped her sit up, his movements slow and careful, and began unlacing the back of her wedding dress. Nola's breath hitched, her body going rigid, and Cole immediately stilled. Just the dress, he murmured. Just so I can see the injuries. Nothing else, I promise. It took every ounce of courage Nola had to let him continue. The dress slipped from her shoulders, revealing the simple cotton shift beneath, and then that too was carefully lifted away. The late afternoon light streaming through the lace curtains illuminated every mark on her skin, the bruises on her ribs in the shape of fingers, the bite mark on her shoulder blade, the scrapes on her hips. But it was when Cole's gaze traveled lower that his face went absolutely white. The inner thighs were bruised purple and black. There were tears in the delicate skin, some already trying to heal, others still raw and seeping. And between her legs, the damage was even worse. Internal tearing that had been bleeding on and off for 5 days, the kind of brutal injury that spoke of violence, not intimacy. Jesus Christ, Cole breathed, and his hands were shaking now, actually shaking. He pressed his palms flat against his thighs, trying to steady himself, and when he looked up at Nola, there were tears in his eyes. I'm so sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry this happened to you. Nola had expected disgust. She'd expected him to turn away, to call her ruined, to demand she leave. But this raw grief on her behalf, undid something inside her. A sob tore from her throat, and then another, and suddenly she was crying in great, gulping gasps. 3 years of pain and fear and loneliness pouring out of her all at once. Cole moved without thinking. He climbed onto the bed beside her and pulled her into his arms, cradling her giant frame against his chest like she was something infinitely precious. Let it out, he murmured into her hair. Let it all out, Nola. You're safe now. I've got you. And for the first time since her mother died, Magnolia Ashworth let herself believe that maybe someone actually did. She cried until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen, cried until there were no tears left, and through it all, Cole held her. His rough hands stroked her hair, his voice murmured soothing nonsense in her ear. His heart beat steady and strong beneath her cheek, an anchor in the storm. When the crying finally subsided into hiccuping breaths, Cole eased her back against the pillows. I'm going to clean the wounds now, he said softly. This is going to sting like hell, but it has to be done. Ready? Nola nodded, biting her lip, and Cole went to work. He'd learned field medicine the hard way, on battlefields where doctors were scarce and men died from infection more often than bullets. His hands were gentle but thorough as he cleaned each injury with carbolic acid solution, talking to her the whole time to distract her from the pain. Clara and I met at a church social, he said, his voice soft and distant. She was the prettiest thing I'd ever seen, with dark hair and eyes like chocolate. Took me 3 months to work up the courage to ask her to dance. When she said yes, I about fell over from shock. He wrung out a cloth and continued his careful work. We were married 6 months later. She was 19, I was 23. We had 2 good years together before she got pregnant. She was so happy, Nola. Used to talk to the baby all day long, tell it stories about what the ranch would be like when they were born. His hand stilled for a moment, and Nola saw the grief wash over his face. The birth went wrong. Something inside her tore that the doctor couldn't fix. She bled out in this very bed, holding my hand and telling me not to be sad. The baby, a little girl, lived for about an hour, just long enough for me to hold her once. He cleared his throat and resumed cleaning. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something. I know what it's like to lose someone. I know what it's like to feel helpless while someone you care about suffers. And I swore after Clara died that I'd never stand by and do nothing while someone was in pain again, not if I could help it. Nola watched him work, this rough-handed rancher with grief carved into the lines of his face, and felt something shift in her chest. Why did you send for a mail-order bride? She asked quietly. If you loved Clara so much, why not find someone here in town? Cole's lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. Because everyone in Copper Ridge knew me as Clara's husband. They all had opinions about when I should move on, who I should court, how long was proper to mourn. I couldn't breathe for all their expectations. He rinsed the cloth again, the water in the basin turning pink. I thought, if I married someone who didn't know me before, someone who didn't have expectations about who I used to be, maybe I could figure out who I am now. Does that make sense? Yes, Nola whispered. It makes perfect sense. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the barn. Do you regret it? Sending for me? Now that you know I'm... She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't say the word damaged out loud. But Cole understood. He set down the cloth and looked her straight in the eyes. I regret that you were hurt. I regret that you suffered. But I don't regret you, Magnolia Ashworth. Not for 1 second. He picked up a pot of salve, something that smelled of herbs and beeswax, and began applying it with infinite gentleness. You're the bravest person I've ever met. You survived something that would have broken most people, and you still got on that train. You still came here. You still stood up in that church and said your vows, even though you were in agony. That's not damaged, Nola. That's steel. The salve was cool against her burning skin, soothing in ways she hadn't expected. Cole worked in silence for a few minutes, his brow furrowed in concentration, and Nola found herself studying his face. He wasn't handsome in the classical sense. His features were too rough, too weathered by sun and wind. But there was something fundamentally good in the set of his jaw, in the gentleness of his hands, in the way he looked at her like she mattered. There, he said finally, sitting back. That's the best I can do without proper medical training. The salve will help with the pain and keep infection at bay, but you need to rest. No getting up unless absolutely necessary. I'll bring you food and water, and we'll change the dressings twice a day until you're healed. He pulled the quilt up over her, tucking it around her shoulders with the care of a man handling something breakable. And Nola, if you spike a fever or the pain gets worse, I don't care what you say. I'm fetching the doctor. Your life is worth more than your reputation. Nola's eyes were already growing heavy, the combination of emotional exhaustion and physical relief pulling her towards sleep. But before she surrendered to it, she reached out and caught Cole's hand. Thank you, she whispered. For believing me. For not... Her voice caught. For being kind. Cole squeezed her hand gently. That's just basic human decency, Nola. The bar for men shouldn't be that low. He started to pull away, but her grip tightened. Stay, she said, surprising herself. Just until I fall asleep. Please, I don't want to be alone. So Cole pulled the rocking chair from the corner and settled into it, his hand still clasped in hers. And as the Wyoming sun sank below the horizon and the room filled with shadows, he watched over his broken bride and made a silent promise to the God he'd stopped believing in after Clara died. He would find Gideon Moss. He would make him pay. And he would show Magnolia Ashworth that not all men were monsters, that some of them, a precious few, knew how to be gentle with the things they loved. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows and carrying with it the scent of coming snow. Winter was descending on Wyoming territory, harsh and unforgiving. But inside that small bedroom, wrapped in lamplight and quilts, two wounded souls had found each other. And though neither of them knew it yet, they were about to discover that the most profound love stories don't begin with passion. They begin with one person seeing another's pain and choosing to stay anyway. 2 weeks passed like a slow thaw after winter. Nola healed in increments, first sitting up without wincing, then standing for short periods, finally walking from the bed to the window to watch the snow fall across the empty pastures. Cole tended her with a patience that bewildered her. He brought meals on trays and read aloud from Clara's collection of novels. He changed her dressings twice daily without ever making her feel ashamed. And slowly, impossibly, Nola began to feel something she'd never experienced before. Safe. On the 15th morning, she woke to find Cole absent from his usual chair. She rose carefully, wrapped Clara's shawl around her shoulders, and followed the sound of chopping wood. Through the kitchen window, she watched him work, his breath forming clouds in the frozen air, his axe rising and falling with mechanical precision. But there was something wrong in the set of his shoulders, something broken in the way he attacked the wood like it had personally offended him. Nola stepped outside barefoot, ignoring the bite of snow against her skin. Cole? He spun around, axe still raised, and she saw the tears frozen on his cheeks. You should be resting. You should be honest with me. She moved closer, her height allowing her to meet his eyes without looking up. What's wrong? The axe fell from his hands. I saw him yesterday. Gideon Moss, in town, laughing with the sheriff like he hadn't destroyed someone's life. And I couldn't do anything, Nola. I just stood there like a coward, because if I touched him, if I so much as looked at him wrong, they'd arrest me and leave you alone. His voice cracked. What kind of man does that make me? Nola's hand found his face, her palm warm against his frozen skin. The kind who chooses me over revenge, the kind I'm falling in love with. The words hung between them, fragile as first snow. Cole's eyes widened at Nola's confession, and for a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then his hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs brushing away the snowflakes caught in her eyelashes. Say that again, he whispered, his voice raw with wonder. I'm falling in love with you, Coltrane Bridger. Nola's words came stronger this time, certain. Not because you saved me, but because you gave me something more precious than rescue. You gave me choice. You gave me dignity. You showed me what a real man looks like. Cole pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist, and when he kissed her, it was nothing like the brutal taking she'd endured on that wagon train. This was soft, questioning, reverent, a promise sealed with tenderness. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole pressed his forehead to hers. I'm going to marry you properly, he said. Not that rushed ceremony in town where you could barely stand. A real wedding, when you're healed, where you can choose me with your whole heart. But Nola shook her head, a smile breaking across her face like sunrise. I already chose you, Cole, the moment you believed me. The moment you held me while I cried. The moment you looked at my broken body and saw someone worth protecting instead of something used up. 3 months later, spring exploded across Wyoming territory in waves of green and gold. Nola stood in the barn doorway, the same barn where she'd collapsed on her wedding day, watching Cole work with the new foal. Her hand drifted unconsciously to her stomach, where the tiniest flutter of new life had begun. Doc Calloway had examined her last week and declared her completely healed. "Whatever your husband did," the old doctor had said with approval, "it saved you from infection and worse. You're a lucky woman, Mrs. Bridger." Lucky. The word would have been laughable 6 months ago. But now, watching her husband's gentle hands guide the foal to its mother, Nola understood that luck had nothing to do with it. This was grace, the unearned gift of finding light in the darkest moment. Cole looked up and caught her watching, his face transformed with that rare smile that made him look 10 years younger. He crossed to her in long strides and pulled her into his arms, his hand settling naturally over the place where their child grew. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That I came here broken," Nola said, "and you loved me whole again." "No," Cole corrected gently. "You were always whole, Nola. I just loved you until you could see it yourself." As they stood together in the doorway, silhouetted against the Wyoming sky, Magnolia Bridger finally understood what it meant to be cherished. Not for what she could give, not despite her scars, but because of everything she was. Giant heart, giant courage, and a capacity for love that had survived the worst and chosen to bloom anyway. This was the promise the title had made, that pain could transform into tenderness, that the most broken among us could find healing in unexpected hands, and that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with passion, but with one person kneeling beside another and saying, "I've got you. You're safe now." We'd love to know where you're watching this story from. Drop your country or city in the comments below, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next powerful story of love, survival, and second chances in the Old West. Your support means everything to us.